My wife proposed a 2-week separation to test our marriage. By day 3, she used our joint card for a romantic hotel with another man, so I ended her little game immediately. Ben, I am a 32-year-old man, and if there is one thing I know intimately, it is the value of hard work. I am a certified industrial welder. I spend 12 hours a day, sometimes 6 days a week, encased in heavy fire-resistant gear, breathing through a respirator, and staring into a blinding arc of electricity that could blind a normal man in seconds. I work on commercial high-rises, massive steel skeletons reaching into the sky, and intricate piping systems for chemical plants. It is dirty, it is loud, and it is physically punishing. My hands are covered in tiny white burn scars, my shoulders constantly ache, and I can never quite scrub the smell of ozone and burning metal out of my skin. But that sweat pays off. I bring home about $95,000 a year, which in our part of Texas is a solid, respectable living. It allowed me to build a foundation. I met Valerie when I was 27 and she was 25. We have been married for 3 years now. She is a receptionist at a mid-sized corporate law firm downtown. She sits in an air-conditioned lobby behind a marble desk, answers phones, schedules meetings, and makes about half of what I do. I never cared about the money difference. I just wanted a partner. 2 years before I even met Valerie, I took my entire life savings, plus a small inheritance from my grandfather, and bought a rundown 1950s ranch-style house in a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify. I did not just buy the house, I rebuilt it with my own 2 hands. I spent every weekend and every evening after my shift pulling permits, rewiring the electrical system, replacing the old galvanized plumbing with copper, and sanding down the original hardwood floors until my knees bled. I installed granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. I poured $40,000 and 2 years of pure sweat equity into making that place a home. Because I bought it before we were married and kept it solely in my name, the title was mine. When Valerie moved in, it felt like the final piece of the puzzle. The first 2 years of our marriage were normal. We had the standard newlywed adjustments. We argued about whose turn it was to do the dishes, we bickered over the thermostat setting because I run hot and she is always freezing, and we tried to plan vacations we could not quite afford yet. Since I made double her salary, we split our household expenses roughly 70-30. She contributed to groceries and utilities, and helped pay for some minor decorative home improvements, but the heavy lifting, the mortgage, the property taxes, the major repairs, that was always on my shoulders. I was happy to carry the weight. I thought I was providing for my family. I thought my exhaustion was a shield that kept her safe and comfortable. I did not realize that while I was out there grinding my joints to dust to give us a future, she was sitting in her pristine, quiet office, getting bored with the present. The comfort I provided became the very thing she would eventually use against me. Things started shifting subtly at first, about 8 months ago. That was when Valerie reconnected with her old college friend, Naomi. Naomi had just moved back to our side of town after a spectacularly messy divorce. She had no kids, no real career to speak of, but she was collecting a very comfortable $2,500 a month in alimony from some tech executive she had managed to marry and divorce within 2 years. Naomi was living in a trendy downtown loft, spending her weekends at overpriced cocktail bars, and treating her life like one long reality television audition. I met Naomi for the first time at a backyard barbecue we hosted for the 4th of July. The Texas heat was brutal that day, and I was standing over the grill, sweating through my shirt, flipping burgers and ribs. Naomi pulled up to our driveway in a brand new leased luxury sport utility vehicle. She stepped out wearing a sundress that looked more appropriate for a Miami nightclub than a family cookout, complete with oversized designer sunglasses and a fresh blowout. My best friend, Wyatt, was standing next to me with a beer in his hand. Wyatt has been my wingman since high school. He is a software developer, brutally honest, with absolutely zero patience for manufactured drama. He took one look at Naomi strutting up our driveway, saw the fake eyelashes and the designer handbag, and immediately christened her the life coach. Throughout the afternoon, I noticed things. Naomi was a woman who believed that having a loud opinion made her interesting. She dominated the conversation at the picnic table, talking endlessly about how her divorce was actually an awakening, how women need to stop settling for basic lives, and how successful relationships require constant challenging and emotional excavation. It was all recycled garbage from whatever pop psychology podcast she had listened to that morning. But the worst part was how Valerie looked at her. My wife hung on her every word like Naomi was some enlightened guru. And then there was the way Naomi interacted with me. Whenever Valerie went inside to get more drinks, Naomi would drift over to the grill. She would stand just a little too close, letting her arm brush against mine. She laughed entirely too hard at my terrible dad jokes. She would look up at me through those fake lashes and say things like, "It is so rare to find a man who actually knows how to work with his hands. Valerie is so lucky. I hope she appreciates you." At the time, I chalked it up to her having an overly flirtatious, extroverted personality. I did not realize she was evaluating the property. She was a walking red flag factory, a woman who had failed at her own marriage and decided the best way to feel better was to tear down someone else's. Part 1.3. The Sabotage Target. 715 words. It did not take long for Naomi's toxic positivity to infect my house. Suddenly, Valerie started coming home with new vocabulary words. She stopped talking about her day and started talking about our dynamic. Why were we so comfortable? Why did our marriage feel like we were just roommates? According to the new philosophy she adopted from Naomi, stability was actually a symptom of stagnation. The tension built over months, but it finally exploded into public sabotage at my parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner in November. I had been working on a massive commercial project downtown that was 3 months behind schedule. To keep my crew on track and secure a massive bonus that I planned to use to pay off the rest of Valerie's student loans, I had to work a 12-hour shift that Saturday. I barely had time to shower, scrub the grease from under my fingernails, and throw on a suit before we rushed to the restaurant. I was exhausted, my back was screaming, but I was proud to be there for my folks. We were sitting at a large table with my extended family. Someone asked Valerie how we were doing, expecting the usual polite small talk. Instead, Valerie took a sip of her wine, sighed loudly, and looked at me across the table. She said, "Well, we are surviving, but it is hard when you are married to someone who is emotionally unavailable." The entire table went dead silent. My mother paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. I stared at my wife, completely blindsided. She went on, using that calm, practice therapy voice she learned from Naomi. She told my entire family that my commitment to providing financially was actually a subconscious avoidance tactic to keep from connecting with her on a deeper, spiritual level. She said my refusal to plan spontaneous midweek dates proved I was taking her for granted. I sat there in my stiff suit, feeling the heat rise in my face, humiliated in front of the people I loved most. I had worked 70 hours that week to pay for the very car she drove to that restaurant, and she was publicly castigating me for not being a romance novelist. I did not yell. I just quietly excused myself, paid the bill for our portion of the dinner, and waited by the car. The ride home was suffocatingly silent. When we got to the house, I realized the truth. My wife was no longer the woman I married. She was a puppet, and Naomi was pulling the strings, manufacturing a crisis where none existed just to prove a twisted point. Home had officially become a minefield, and I was just waiting for the explosion. The explosion came on a random Thursday evening in middle of January. I got home around 7 o'clock, which was early for me during that phase of the project. My boots were caked in dry mud, and my muscles felt like they had been run through a meat grinder. Normally, if I got home at 7, Valerie and I would figure out dinner together. But when I walked into the kitchen, the house was eerily quiet. Valerie was sitting at the dining room table, her hands folded in front of her. She looked like an actress waiting for the director to call action. She had already eaten. There was a plastic container of leftover sweet and sour pork sitting on the counter next to a sticky note with my name on it. I did not say a word. I just washed my hands at the sink, grabbed a fork, opened the cold Chinese food, and sat down opposite her. The pork was chewy and freezing, but I was too hungry to care. I took a bite and looked at her, waiting. She took a deep, Dramatic breath. I have been thinking about us, she said, her voice trembling just enough to seem authentic. I have been thinking about where we are headed. I think we need to take a break. I stopped chewing. I swallowed the cold food and just stared at her. She quickly added, not permanent. Just a separation. A 2-week break to see how we feel apart. To remember why we fell in love. We need to see if we miss each other. We need to see if you will actually fight for us. I knew exactly where this script came from. I could practically hear Naomi whispering the words into her ear. This was the ultimate manufactured drama. Naomi had probably told her that a real man would fall to his knees, beg for forgiveness, and shower her with expensive gifts to prove his devotion. This was not about finding herself, it was about making me dance for her attention. It was a loyalty test designed by a woman who treated marriage like a disposable commodity. I looked at Valerie. I looked at the rehearsed sadness in her eyes, the manipulative posture, the sheer entitlement of sitting in a house I built, eating food I paid for, and demanding I jump through psychological hoops to prove my worth. Something deep inside my chest just snapped. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I put my fork down. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I did not beg. I simply shrugged my shoulders, looked her dead in the eye, and said, okay. If that is what you want, okay. The silence that followed was deafening. Valerie blinked. The script in her head had suddenly caught fire. She had expected a shouting match, tears, desperation. She had not prepared for absolute, chilling indifference. You agree? She asked, her voice faltering. I picked up my fork, scooped up another piece of cold pork, and went back to eating. 2 weeks, I said with my mouth full. Got it. Her face fell. The disappointment radiating from her was palpable. She did not want space. She wanted a performance, and I had just walked off the stage. We established the rules that night in about 10 minutes. It was strictly business. 2 weeks of acting like we were entirely single. She would go stay at Naomi's downtown loft. We would have zero contact unless there was a genuine medical or household emergency. We would meet back at the house in exactly 14 days to reassess. I went to sleep in the guest room that night and slept like a rock for the first time in 6 months. The next morning, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom with a mug of black coffee and watched her pack. She dragged 2 large suitcases from the closet and started throwing in her work clothes, her makeup bags, and enough casual outfits to survive a 2-week vacation. She kept pausing, looking over her shoulder at me, waiting for me to break. Waiting for me to step in, grab her hand, and tell her I could not live without her. I just took a slow sip of my coffee and asked if she needed help carrying the heavy bag down the front steps. She glared at me, zipped the suitcase with aggressive force, and dragged it out herself. I followed her to the driveway, stood on the porch, and watched her load her bags into her silver Honda Civic. She did not look back as she backed out of the driveway and drove down the street. The moment her car turned the corner, the house physically changed. The heavy, suffocating tension that had been pressing against the walls for the last 8 months simply vanished. The silence was not lonely, it was liberating. I walked back inside and realized I could do whatever I wanted. I did not have to walk on eggshells. I did not have to analyze the emotional undertones of asking what was for dinner. That first weekend, Wyatt came over. He brought a massive cardboard box full of greasy tacos from our favorite food truck and a 12-pack of cheap beer. We sat on my leather sofa for 6 straight hours, watching college football. Nobody walked through the living room to complain about toxic masculinity in sports. Nobody sighed loudly from the kitchen to signal that I was ignoring them. It was absolute paradise. But I am not a stupid man. I knew this peace was temporary, and the entire situation felt fundamentally wrong. Men like Wyatt and I do not trust sudden, bizarre behavior shifts without a hidden motive. On Sunday morning, while the house was completely quiet, I went into my home office. I pulled up my laptop and started doing something I should have done months ago. I began a complete forensic audit of my own life. I pulled up our joint checking and savings accounts. I downloaded every bank statement. I documented her student loan balance, which was still sitting at $28,000 because she only ever paid the minimums while I threw extra cash at it. I made meticulous spreadsheets of the home improvement costs, separating what I paid from the fraction she contributed. I was not planning a divorce yet, but as a guy who works in construction, I know you never walk onto a shaky site without wearing a hard hat. I was putting on my armor. By day 10 of the separation, the absolute lack of contact from my end was clearly driving the other side crazy. Valerie had texted me exactly once on the third day, a pathetic message saying, "I hope you are thinking about us." I had simply liked the message and put my phone away. But Naomi could not handle the silence. Her grand plan was stalling, and she needed to force the issue. She did not just send a text. She decided to ambush me in my own territory. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was on the job site for the new commercial high-rise. It was loud, dusty, and smelled like diesel fuel and hot metal. I was on my 30-minute lunch break, sitting on a stack of wooden pallets near the perimeter fence, eating a sandwich with hands covered in black soot. I heard the crunch of gravel and looked up. Walking through the active construction gate, completely ignoring the hard hat required signs, was Naomi. She stuck out like a sore thumb. She was wearing tight designer jeans, high-heeled boots that were immediately getting ruined in the mud, and a low-cut silk blouse. She was carrying 2 expensive iced coffees from a boutique cafe downtown. Half the crew stopped what they were doing to stare at the ridiculous spectacle. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand as she approached. "Hey, Garrett," she said, plastering on a look of deep, sorrowful concern. "I know I am not supposed to be here, but I was just so worried about you." She held out one of the sweating plastic cups. I took it, being careful not to let my dirty gloves touch her manicured fingers. "What are you doing here, Naomi?" I asked, keeping my voice flat. She sighed, shifting her weight so her hips jutted out. "I just hate seeing what Valerie is doing to you. She is acting crazy at my place. Complaining all the time. I try to tell her she is making a massive mistake, leaving a good, hard-working man like you alone in that big house." It was so incredibly transparent it was almost insulting. She was essentially peeing on a fire hydrant to mark her territory. Her friend had been out of the house for 10 days, and she was already showing up at my job site, dressed to kill, offering me coffee and sympathy. She was a predator looking for a soft, wounded target. She stepped closer, invading my personal space, ignoring the dust blowing around us. "You know," she murmured, lowering her voice so the guys nearby could not hear, "if you ever need to talk, or just need company so you do not feel so isolated, I am always here for you. Night or day." I looked at her. I looked at the heavy makeup, the calculating eyes, the absolute betrayal of her supposed best friend. I felt a surge of pure disgust, but I forced it down. If she wanted to play games, I could play too. I put on my best exhausted, heartbroken face. I looked down at the dirt. "Thank you, Naomi," I said softly. "It has been really hard. I might just take you up on that." Her eyes lit up with predatory triumph. She smiled, touched my dirty shoulder, and strutted back to her luxury car. I dumped the fancy coffee straight into the dirt the second she was out of sight. If you're thrilled with how Garrett handled the situation, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach a wider audience. Thank you so much. It was 11 at night on the Friday of my first week alone. The house was completely silent, the kind of quiet that lets you hear the hum of the refrigerator from the other room. I was sitting on my leather sofa in the dark, watching a documentary with the volume turned down low, enjoying the fact that I did not have to explain why I found history interesting. Valerie had left a lot of her non-essential electronics behind when she packed her bags in a hurry. One of those things was her older model iPad. It was sitting on the coffee table, plugged into the wall charger. Because she had not disabled the wireless connection, it was still firmly connected to our home network. I was just about to get up and head to bed when the screen lit up. A notification banner popped across the glass. It was a message. I usually respect privacy. In 3 years of marriage, I had never once scrolled through her phone. But given the absolute circus she had dragged me into with this separation, my survival instincts were on high alert. I leaned forward and looked at the screen. The message was from a contact saved simply as Carter. It read, "I cannot wait for tomorrow night. Are you sure he has no idea?" My heart stopped. It did not flutter or break. It just felt like a heavy stone dropping into my stomach. The iPad was locked, but I was the one who set it up for her 2 years ago. I punched in her 4-digit passcode, her birth year, and the screen unlocked instantly. The text messages synced automatically from her cloud account. What I found in that message thread was a complete autopsy of my marriage. I sat there in the dark for a full hour, reading 3 weeks of conversations. 47 messages in total. It started off innocent enough about a month ago, talking about some corporate marketing conference she attended downtown. Carter was a marketing director from Austin. He was in his mid-30s, drove a luxury car, and had a vocabulary built on corporate buzzwords. But within a week, the messages turned personal. They turned into a constant stream of complaints about me. I read my own wife typing out how she felt unappreciated. I read her telling this stranger that my hands were always rough and dirty, calling my career grunt work, and comparing my calluses to Carter's soft, lotion-covered office hands. The ultimate betrayal was looking at the timestamps. She had been texting this man from our bed while I was sleeping next to her. She had been messaging him the very morning she packed her bags and told me she needed a break to find herself. She was not finding herself. She had already found Carter. The 2-week separation was not a test of my love. It was a hall pass she manufactured so she could sleep with another man without technically feeling like she was cheating in our house. The initial shock faded within 20 minutes, leaving behind a cold, mechanical anger. I am a builder by trade. When I find a structural failure, I do not sit around and cry about the cracked concrete. I assess the damage, I map out the load-bearing walls, and I figure out how to demolish the bad sections without bringing the whole roof down on my head. I walked into my home office, turned on my desktop computer, and brought up our joint banking portal. Valerie and I maintained separate personal accounts, but we had a joint checking and credit card account for household expenses, groceries, and emergencies. I downloaded the credit card statement for the past 30 days and started matching up the dates with the text messages I had just read on the iPad. The picture became perfectly clear, and it was infuriating. 3 days into our so-called separation, there was a charge for $150 at a high-end steakhouse downtown. 2 days later, a charge for $90 at a wine bar. But the smoking gun was the transaction pending from 2 nights ago. A charge for $280 at the Omni Hotel. I leaned back in my desk chair and stared at the glowing monitor. She was not just cheating on me. She was using my money, the money I earned breathing in welding fumes and burning my arms, to fund her affair. The timeline matched perfectly. 2 nights ago, Naomi had sent me a text message saying that Valerie was having a really hard time, that she was crying on the couch and just needed space to soul search alone. While Naomi was texting me those lies, playing the role of the concerned mediator, my wife was swiping our joint Visa card at the front desk of a luxury hotel with a marketing director from Austin. The audacity of it was almost impressive. Naomi and Valerie had orchestrated this entire circus. Naomi pushed Valerie out the door and into another man's bed, all so she could clear the path to swoop in and play the supportive, available woman for the heartbroken husband left behind. They thought I was a foolish, emotional laborer who would just blindly stumble through their little traps. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I needed more than just a line item on a bank statement. I needed physical, undeniable proof that would hold up in any court in Texas. I grabbed my car keys, put on a dark jacket, and walked out the front door. It was close to midnight when I pulled my truck out of the driveway. The streets were empty, and the drive downtown took less than 20 minutes. I pulled into the massive concrete parking garage across the street from the Omni Hotel. I parked my truck on the second level and started walking up and down the rows of cars. The air smelled like exhaust and damp concrete. It took me about 15 minutes of searching, walking past rows of polished corporate sedans and luxury sports utility vehicles, before I spotted it on the 4th floor. Her silver Honda Civic. It was parked conspicuously next to a black BMW sedan with license plates registered in Austin, Texas. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and checked the camera settings. I took multiple, clear photographs of her car showing the license plate. I took pictures of the BMW next to it. I made sure my phone's location services and timestamps were turned on, cementing the exact time, date, and GPS coordinates into the metadata of every single image. I walked back to my truck, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the steering wheel for a long moment. I did not feel sad. I did not feel the urge to run upstairs, kick down a hotel room door, and scream at them. I just felt a deep, heavy exhaustion, followed immediately by absolute clarity. I dialed Wyatt's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Wyatt," I said, my voice completely steady. "I need you to listen to me carefully. I am sitting in the parking garage at the Omni Hotel. I found her car. I found the bank statements. She is up there with a guy from Austin, and Naomi has been covering for her the whole time." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I heard Wyatt sit up in bed. "Are you serious right now?" he asked, his tone instantly shifting from sleepy to razor-sharp. "I am dead serious," I replied. "I have pictures. I have the iCloud messages. I have the credit card receipts." Wyatt let out a low whistle. "What is the play here, man? Do you want me to come down there? We can wait by their cars." "No," I said, starting the engine of my truck. "No confrontation. No drama. That is what they want. They want me to act crazy so they can play the victims. I am driving home. Tomorrow morning, I am calling a lawyer. I am going to dismantle her entire life, piece by piece, and she is not going to know a thing until the walls cave in." Monday morning, I took a personal day off from the job site. At 9 in the morning, I was sitting in the polished oak office of Winston, a divorce attorney Wyatt had recommended. Winston was a sharply dressed, no-nonsense guy in his late 50s who looked like he had seen every variation of human betrayal. I slid a thick manila folder across his desk. Inside were printed copies of the 47 text messages, the time-stamped photographs from the hotel parking garage, and the credit card statements highlighting the $280 hotel charge. Winston put on his reading glasses and spent 15 minutes going through the file in complete silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. When he finally looked up, he took off his glasses and tapped the folder. "Well," he said quietly, "this is what we call an airtight case. In the state of Texas, adultery can significantly impact the division of assets, especially when marital funds are used to facilitate the affair." Winston laid out the battle plan. "Because I bought the house 2 years before the marriage and kept the deed solely in my name, the house was mine. The improvements were trickier, but since I did all the physical labor and paid for the vast majority of the materials, her claim on the equity was minimal at best." I spent the next 48 hours executing Winston's legal strategy with surgical precision. I went to the bank and opened a brand new individual checking account. I redirected my direct deposit from my employer to the new account. I legally transferred exactly 50% of our joint savings into my solo account. Then I went home and started the physical eviction. I bought a stack of heavy-duty cardboard moving boxes. I went into the bedroom and packed up everything Valerie had left behind. Her winter coats, her shoes, her endless collection of decorative pillows, her vanity mirror. I did not break anything. I did not throw anything away. I just systematically erased her footprint from my house. I rented a cheap, climate-controlled storage unit on the edge of town, paid for 3 months in advance, and stacked all her boxes inside. On my way home, I stopped at the hardware store, bought 3 new heavy-duty deadbolts, and changed the locks on the front, back, and garage doors. The house was a fortress again. While I was securing my assets, Naomi was getting desperate. She had been texting me generic, supportive messages for days, and I had been giving her just enough engagement to keep her on the hook. On Wednesday evening, she called me. Her voice was thick with manufactured anxiety. "Garrett," she said, her breath catching slightly. "I need to see you. Something terrible has happened. I found out something about Valerie, and I cannot keep it from you anymore. We need to meet." We agreed to meet at a dimly lit, overpriced cocktail bar near her apartment. I arrived early, ordered a water, and hit record on the voice memo app on my phone, sliding it face down on the table. Naomi walked in 20 minutes later. She was wearing a skin-tight black dress with a neckline that plunged dangerously low. She sat across from me, ordered a martini, and reached out to grab both of my hands. Her hands were cold. Her perfume was overpowering. "I feel so sick to my stomach," she began, looking deeply into my eyes. "Valerie has been lying to both of us. She is not soul-searching. She has been seeing a guy named Carter. I just found out today, and I am so disgusted with her." It took every ounce of self-control I had not to laugh in her face. She was delivering the performance of a lifetime, playing the loyal, devastated friend who was simply forced by her moral compass to reveal the ugly truth. "You deserve so much better than this, Garrett," she whispered, leaning forward so her dress shifted lower. "You are a provider. You're solid. Any woman would be lucky to have a man who works as hard as you do. Valerie is a fool." She squeezed my hands. "I am here for you. Whatever you need to get through this, I am right here." I played the part perfectly. I slumped my shoulders, looked down at the table, and let my voice crack just a little. "Thank you, Naomi," I said, shaking my head. "I am just so broken. I do not know what I would do without a friend like you." I let her buy my drink. I let her stroke my ego. I let her think she had successfully destroyed my marriage and secured her position as the replacement, all while my phone silently recorded every single word of her premeditated sabotage. Friday marked exactly 14 days since Valerie had packed her bags and driven away. The 2-week break was officially over. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, while Valerie was sitting behind her marble reception desk at the law firm, a man in a plain gray suit walked through the double-glass doors. He asked for her by name, confirmed her identity, and handed her a thick manila envelope. "You have been served," he said, turning around and walking out. Inside the envelope was the formal petition for divorce. But Winston was a theatrical lawyer. He had attached a few key exhibits to the back of the petition. Page 1 of the exhibits was a printed screenshot of her text message to Carter, complaining about my dirty hands. Page 2 was the credit card receipt from the Omni Hotel. Page 3 was the photograph of her Honda Civic parked next to Carter's BMW. My phone rang exactly 12 minutes later. I was standing on the 12th floor of the construction site, looking out over the city skyline. The wind was blowing hard. I answered the call and put the phone to my ear. "What the hell is this?" Valerie screamed. Her voice was completely unhinged, echoing through the speaker. "Divorce papers? With evidence of adultery?" We were on a break. We were supposed to be figuring things out. I leaned against a steel beam and watched the traffic far below. "You figured it out pretty well at the Omni Hotel," I said calmly. "I hope the room service was worth $280. There was a sudden, breathless silence on the line. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she realized she had been completely exposed. "How did you get my messages?" she demanded, panic creeping into her tone. "You invaded my privacy. You had no right." "The iPad you left on the coffee table syncs to the cloud, Valerie," I replied. "You used marital funds to sleep with another man while asking me to wait for you like a backup plan. I moved all your junk to a storage unit on the highway. The access code is your new boyfriend's birthday." The mask finally slipped completely. The therapy talk disappeared, replaced by pure, venomous entitlement. "You know what?" she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "I am glad I did it. Carter actually respects me. He takes me to nice places. He wears a suit. He does not come home smelling like a garbage dump. Your job is nothing but dirty, disgusting grunt work. You're just a laborer. Carter makes real money." I laughed. A genuine, relaxed laugh that startled the guy working next to me. "Great," I said. "Then Carter can pay off your $28,000 in student loans, because I am done carrying your dead weight. Do not come to the house. The locks are changed. Have your lawyer call Winston." I ended the call, blocked her number, and went back to welding. The heavy, dark cloud that had been hanging over my life for months was completely gone. The divorce proceedings moved faster than anyone anticipated, mostly because Valerie had absolutely no leverage. Her lawyer, A woman who usually specialized in aggressive asset division took one look at the stamped hotel receipts, the explicit text messages, and the dates of the marital separation, and told Valerie to take whatever deal we offered. Texas family courts do not look kindly on spouses who use joint checking accounts to fund hotel rendezvous. By early May, the final settlement was signed by the judge. I kept the house entirely. I kept my truck, my retirement accounts, and 65% of the cash we had in our joint savings. Valerie walked away with her Honda Civic, her clothing, and every single penny of her $28,000 student loan debt. Because she was the cheating party with a documented timeline of adultery, there was absolutely zero spousal support awarded. She had essentially traded a paid-off house and financial security for a few nights in a hotel with a guy who talked in marketing buzzwords. On the exact afternoon the divorce decree was stamped and finalized, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Naomi. "Congratulations on your freedom," it read, followed by a champagne glass emoji. "You survived. We should celebrate tonight. Just the two of us. Let me take you to Meridian. 7 o'clock. My treat." Meridian was the most expensive, pretentious restaurant in the downtown district. It was the kind of place where appetizers cost $30, and the lighting was designed to make everyone look like a movie star. Naomi was finally cashing in her chips. She believed she had successfully navigated the minefield, eliminated her best friend from the picture, and was now ready to step in and claim the prize. I stared at the text message for a long time. I could have just ignored it. I could have blocked her number and moved on with my life in peace. But men who build things for a living know that if you leave a rotten foundation in the ground, it will eventually ruin the next house built on top of it. Naomi needed to be completely demolished. I replied to her text. "Sounds perfect. See you at 7. Then I opened a burner texting application I had downloaded on my phone earlier that week. I typed in Valerie's cell phone number. I composed a short, anonymous message. It read, "If you want to know why Carter has been acting distant lately, you need to ask your best friend Naomi. They have been secretly talking behind your back since January. They are meeting tonight at Meridian Restaurant at 7 to celebrate getting rid of you. Do not let them make a fool out of you." I hit send, deleted the application from my phone, and went to take a long, hot shower. The board was set. The pieces were moving. It was time for the final act. I arrived at Meridian at exactly 5 minutes to 7. The restaurant was packed with the evening dinner rush, full of people wearing expensive suits and designer dresses. I spotted Naomi sitting at a prime corner booth near the floor-to-ceiling windows. She had gone all out. She was wearing a stunning, form-fitting red dress, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked up and beamed as I approached the table, standing up to give me a lingering, entirely too intimate hug. "You look amazing, Garrett," she purred, sliding back into the booth and immediately reaching across the crisp white tablecloth to cover my hand with hers. "I am so proud of how strong you have been through all of this ugly business." I looked at her hand resting on mine. I looked at the predatory gleam in her eyes. I did not smile back. I gently pulled my hand out from under hers and leaned back against the leather seat. "You know, Naomi," I said, keeping my voice low and conversational. "I have been doing a lot of thinking about how all of this played out. About how you convinced Valerie to ask for that separation. About how you knew she was going to the Omni Hotel with Carter, and yet you texted me that same night saying she was crying on your couch." Naomi's smile froze. The color instantly drained from her perfectly contoured cheeks. Her hand twitched on the table. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice suddenly tight. "I was protecting you. I was the one who told you the truth. You created the problem so you could offer yourself as the solution," I replied, my tone completely flat. "You manipulated a weak-minded woman into destroying her marriage because you wanted the stability I offered. You recorded conversations in your head, but I recorded the one we had at the bar. I know exactly what you are. You are a parasite." Before she could form a coherent response, the heavy glass doors at the front of the restaurant swung open with violent force. I looked over Naomi's shoulder. Valerie was storming through the dining room. She was wearing sweatpants, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were wild with pure, unadulterated fury. She had taken the bait hook, line, and sinker. Naomi turned her head to follow my gaze and actually gasped out loud when she saw Valerie charging toward our table like a freight train. I stood up, pulled a $20 bill from my wallet, and tossed it on the table for the water. "Have a great dinner, ladies," I said, stepping smoothly out of the booth. I walked briskly toward the exit, passing Valerie just as she reached the table. She did not even look at me. Her eyes were locked entirely on Naomi's red dress. I walked out the front doors, crossed the street to the parking garage where Wyatt was waiting in his truck, and turned around to watch the show through the massive restaurant windows. It took less than 10 seconds for the explosion. We could hear the muffled screaming through the glass. Valerie grabbed Naomi's expensive leather purse from the booth and dumped its contents entirely over the table, sending cocktails and silverware crashing to the floor. Naomi shrieked, stood up, and shoved Valerie hard in the chest. Valerie retaliated by grabbing a handful of Naomi's perfectly styled hair. Both women went down hard, crashing into the neighboring table, taking plates of expensive pasta and wine glasses with them. Diners were scrambling out of the way, waiters were shouting, and Wyatt was sitting next to me in the truck, eating popcorn he had brought from home, dialing the police non-emergency line to report a violent disturbance. Within 5 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived with lights flashing. We watched as officers marched into the restaurant, pulled the 2 screaming, disheveled women apart, and marched them out the front doors in handcuffs. They were shoved into the back of separate squad cars, both arrested for public affray and property damage. Valerie called me the next morning from the county holding cell, demanding I post her bail. I simply hung up the phone. I heard later through the grapevine that Carter dumped her the moment he found out she had been arrested in a viral restaurant brawl. Naomi was too humiliated to show her face downtown for months. As for me, I went back to my quiet, clean, peaceful house. I bought a massive new television, filled the fridge with whatever I wanted to eat, and finally took a deep breath of fresh air. So, looking back at how I let them tear each other apart in that restaurant, am I the asshole for setting up the grand finale, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story.